Welcome to the SPL Rundown, your weekly look at all the SPL action. I'm your host, Apam, joined by Lermy Wormy and Frost, and this week we have a special guest, Hinduman of the casting squad, joins us here to break down the last week of Phase 2. The jungler for SSG, Cheerio, joins me a little bit later on to talk about everything that's happened so far this season, so be sure to stick around for that. But let's dive right into Week 14 and talk about Renegades versus United. I think this, everyone will agree, was the most important set of the weekend. Basically, whoever won this set was going to get 6th place and make the playoffs, the Phase 2 playoffs. I'm just going to start by saying, what is Barrow smoking? He picked Scotty and Apollo. I think he's just trying to, maybe get all the gods played. But, very interesting picks this game. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Combination of a meme because Apollo, Scotty, Apwash, that were the only ones that weren't played yet. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna play them now. But why now, Barrow? Why when this is the most important game for you?
Yep.
But you choose to do that now. And not only that, I almost take this personally. I've been on him for 3 years to build Bloodforge, and now he goes for it. We've got Twitter discussions back and forth where he's like, no, you're stupid. You don't compare item for item. You go build for build and this and that. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, Bloodforge is the way to go. So is he legit? Is he memeing? It's like, it's a fine line where he finally relaxes and just kind of goes with it. And then the results just come through for him. It worked. That's all that matters, I suppose. It worked.
I do think that's all that matters.
Frost is right. Like, at the end of the day, as long as you get the W, no one cares. Like, you can pick these weird picks that everyone's like, oh, this isn't meta at the moment. But as soon as it gets a win, all of a sudden, it can be viable or now first ban for some reason.
Sure.
Like, we've seen that go through the metas before. Like, I'm not surprised at all. I am surprised, though, like you said, that he did it on the games that mattered the most to him. You know what I mean? Like against this United squad. But the fact they both worked out great was technically good for the game, I guess, in one sense. And Renegades are kind of destroyed that day, I would say.
I think they did as well.
It's kind of crazy, too, because we, in our last episode, not a single one of us voted for Renegades at all.
Whoa.
We thought it would be, a
yeah.
2-0 wash the entire time for United, and just to see, like you said, I don't know what juice they were all on. The Jets, they were there. They were turned on, dude. I don't know what happened with this squad, but it seemed to click. I feel like they all just kind of did their stuff, and it worked out that day.
I'm sure it must help that Scotty is like a comfort pick for Barra as well. He definitely loved playing Scotty no matter what. So
because the ice, he loves the ice, and you know who designed that despicable ability? Yeah, we've got him right here.
Right, listen, right. I just need to clear this up, right? Yes, I came up with the idea of the ice field. Okay, in the original iteration, when they were talking about Scotty design, they're like, we kind of want some abilities to focus on, the frost and the cold because we're going to have the pet involved and things. And I was like, it'd be really cool, guys, if we had a Muzenkarb honey that you could draw it just like the AMC ability, but it would be an ice field, yeah? And you can create a giant slip and slide. And that turned into the big discussion about how we could get the tech to potentially work to make that slide happen. And then they were like, okay, cool. And I didn't know about that they were putting it in the game. It was just a suggestion. And they came in the game and they added damage to it, which I never suggested. It was just supposed to be a weird CC. And not only that, then they added the ping pong effect to it as well, which I thought was ludicrous. I'm like, okay, that's too much, especially because you can ping pong and die into a wall over and over again. But yeah, I had some involvement, but not all involvement in that Billy, okay? The CC is me. The damage is not me. That's what I'm going to say there.
Sure. Any other thoughts about this game? My notes here say, there was a hard siege in game 1, but that sort of paved the way for a pretty easy game 2. I think it was a fairly quick one in game 2 and, a lot of kills for RNG as well. Everyone looked very good on that side.
I mean, I say that it didn't, or I don't know where the juice comes from, but I wasn't on the last cast for the predictions. I voted 2-0 for United, and it just comes down to Jake versus Gino. Yes, they're both new, but Jake has a sort of swagger and confidence to him. Reminds me a lot of, who was the solo laner that Barrow was with a while ago? Shoot, I'm actually forgetting his name right now. Yeah, Aquarius.
Aquarius. Which one you want? Because he's had Cyclone. I mean, he's had Bastion. He's had
Aquarius also had that swagger and confidence despite being new, where he'd come in and Barrow talked about this. Aquarius would go, this idiot, give me Thanatos right now. And that confidence kind of gasses up Barrow. It really gets him to sort of just relax into it because I know he does deal with stress during the sets. And Jake just has that sort of, all right, we're going to stomp on them. And Jake has been very involved with Gino over the longest time. If
Sure.
anyone's going to stop Gino, it's going to be Jake.
Yeah, yeah.
Dude, give me tier.
I do want to get your guys' opinion on where you see this Renegades team ending up in playoffs, or maybe even looking forward to Worlds a little bit. Do you think that this win and maybe going to playoffs, this is a way for them to build some momentum? And is that something that they can do even at playoffs?
I'd like to think so. Even in the Reddit, everyone was clamoring, "This is the Barracuda I've been wanting to see." If Renegades had just been doing this all year, like, of course, Renegades is so stupid that they took them this long to figure it out, to just play what's fun. No, I think it was just a big, huge bolster in their confidence to who they were going against. It was more of a personal thing for them than an actual overall momentum. I think they're well aware that they kind of were the better team here. At least they weren't the underdogs this time around.
Right.
I don't know how that's going to fare for them in the playoffs. I don't think it's really much gas in the tank for them.
Yeah, when I look at the playoffs and I look at Renegades, if I'm honest, I mean, they're phase 2 this year. They haven't taken out, they didn't win against PK, they didn't win against SSG at all, or Sanguine. So there's 3 teams, the top 3 teams, that destroyed them during the phase. They didn't look close for the most part. There was 1 or 2 games. But then again, well, Ghost, they did take a set off Ghost. They've taken sets off Radiance this split. There is signs there, right? And I think that's the only thing you can really look at. Because when you look at the series standings for the split, Renegade 6 and 15, the next closest one up, which is PK, is 12 and 9. So like there's a double amount of win jump in terms of where Renegades needs to be. Can they do it on a given weekend? Yes, that's the big key there. I think they've still got a shot to get to a semi-final, maybe get themselves some more points and maybe sneak somewhere. But realistically, I think it's going to be an uphill battle, and the best thing they can really do is get as much experience trying to rush for the Worlds, really.
Yeah. Your thoughts on Renegades' playoff chances?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult for them because even in their second game in the United set, like, United knew exactly what Renegades wanted to play. They just couldn't come in with the game plan to deal with it. So now that people know, oh, Ratatosker is the last for one trick, or kind of like that. I mean, like, he still did well in the second game, but I feel like if they're able to target out this jungler, that's going to be a huge part of the momentum that gets slowed down. And I feel like, they take away the Guan Yu for Variety, Tier for both Variety and Jake. I mean, they can work with that. They know exactly what the strategy is. It's just all about being able to control the wild card of duo, because, like, I don't think really anyone knew what was going to happen there with a Scotty Tier duo lane when they locked that in the first time. But if they come in a little bit prepared and Renegades don't have anything new up their sleeves, I mean, they'll probably struggle.
Yeah. Any final thoughts about this set? Anything I might have missed? Anything that stood out to you guys?
There's an overall thing, but it's going to be frequent enough throughout the sets that it won't matter. They're going for the fail knots. It's always been the attack speed, but now we're going for a sort of crit oriented build. And I was wondering why we didn't see that before. Yeah, with Spectra and all that, but if you have appropriate peel, you can kind of get the damage where you need it to be. You've got like 30% pen in the build alone. It's a 10 physical, and then everyone gets a crit ability chance on people on top of cooldowns, which help a lot with survivabilities, and that's kind of been the defining why do we only see Rom and Cupid, because they're safe enough to actually be played into. Fail not just increases survivability.
Sure. Definitely. I think the bigger thing on that as well really is to do with we're going to see a patch change really soon, and like that's going to make a knock-on effect. But some of the health builds that you've seen coming through, it's always been a no-no to an extent of never chins and crit at the same time, right? But we were kind of in a world where it could have been theoretical for the right reasonings to have a bit of both. But I think with the health builds maybe getting hit a little bit by the healing sustain changes, I think you'll end up seeing a little bit more crit come back into action again anyway, as builds start to mix up again once more. But I'm excited to see, how it kind of plays out. It's good to see Failnut, though. I do like Failnut as an item. I think it's a little bit strong. 20% CDR. Jesus, that's a ton for a hunter. But yeah, I'm surprised we haven't seen more of it. I think we will see more as time goes on, though.
It's just such a sick build, being able to combo that with the Malice, and the fact that the attack speed items are so good right now. You just straight up could do both. There is room in the build to do both. Which is awesome for hunters, but not for everyone else.
Sure.
If we're in a crit meta, come Worlds, Zap's winning. And I say Zap is winning. I'm telling like the other 4 members of his team could be sick, and he's got subs for all of them. Just crit on Zap for Worlds, and he's going to take the whole thing.
I'm just saying as well, right? You're all gonna, if that does happen, you're all gonna miss Nemi and Lion. I'll
Yeah.
guarantee you, because the world is just gonna live on thorns to try and stop it, because there's
Sure.
not much else you can do.
God.
I think Cheerio mentioned in one of the pieces on the Smite Pro YouTube that there was a theory a while ago that each account had its own individual crit RNG sort of rating. And some accounts have higher crit RNG rating and get more crits than other accounts.
It's if you've got an even ID when you make your account,
Yeah.
you get extra crit, is what it is. That's what I've heard. Yeah.
So, some players, Cheerio thinks that players like Vote and, some of the other ADCs in particular maybe have a high crit RNG.
Yeah, or it could be the fact that they actually build crit, so you actually see those numbers, right? Like, because that's the other issue. I mean, you're never gonna see a mage crit, so.
Sure,
Yeah, but there's a higher chance at 5% than there is at 90. It feels like it.
That's crazy.
At times, I can definitely agree with that. At times, for sure. They say those numbers, I don't necessarily believe them.
All right, let's move on to the next set of the week. PK versus Obey. And we could have mentioned the Apollo for the last set, but, we have to mention the Zapollo in this set, right? Zap, I think, looked really great on the Apollo in game 1, 8-4. Did he play game 2 as well?
No, I don't think
he
he
didn't.
did.
I think he played Rama in game 2. But still, we see Apollo, which had not been seen in the SPL yet as well, I believe, from both Bera and Zap. What does Apollo bring to the table that, and why are we seeing him right now instead of earlier?
Nostalgia. These are the two veteran hunters that'll be sitting in their rocking chairs. Do you remember Apollo? And he used to run the meta. That's pretty much what it brings to these two. I think it was mostly picked for one, the memes, because he hadn't been played yet, as sentimental reasons, and it's not like it was going to do anything for seeding. He did feed his brains out on it. That's classic Zap to me. When he really doesn't care too much, you can tell.
Where he's diving in, trying to make the play happen, and doesn't care. Yup. That is, I mean, yeah, the whole Apollo thing. I mean, the Apollo game that he played against Obey. I mean, he went 8-4 in that one. It wasn't too bad. I think the biggest it was the other day as well where we saw the Apollo. I think that one of the reasons we've seen a little bit more Apollo is mainly because of the tweet that I put out about making sure every god got picked.
Sure.
And I jokingly said their world's placement would increase this year. So I think that's why both Zap and Barra went straight to them to try and get some of that juice.
I gotcha.
Good script.
It did. I thought that, but then I'm like, well, I'm joking. Please, I'm going to get angry fans soon after when I put that out. But secondly, sometimes I think there's a lot of gods that end up being sleeper because they just don't get thought about for a minute or two, too. And then when you mention them, you're like, well, maybe I give it a go. I think what Apollo brings to the table, if you think about recently, the biggest change for him was the moves, which was just a slight animation change, which does make it a little bit more effective and a little bit better to play around with. But more than anything else, it's something that only really Chernobog brings to the table, which is some sort of global rotation.
Right.
But in his case, it's more global vision and rotation too. Split push availability. Like, I think Apollo's always going to have a small place, but it always depends on what the meta's at too. How can you pick an Apollo when a Cupid's in the meta, for example? You can't. So unless Cupid's away, and that's one of the things that I think some fans at home don't always recognize, is that the picks and bans of a meta and some gods being strong require other gods to be weak in that case. So if Cupid's in the meta, it's very rare that you're going to see Apollo. It's very rare that you're going to see a Jabalonke. You know why? Because Cupid does really well against those.
Sure. Lermy, any thoughts on Apollo?
I mean, it is such a nice change for them to increase the duration, or rather decrease the duration of the moves, because really that was his big engage tool. And especially if you're trying to be aggressive in lane, which against a ROM it's become a little bit harder to do, but at the same time, this is Zatman we're talking about. He always goes in, always tries to put the moves on the enemy, and actually it's a super good strategy too, because you can instigate your passive if you dash to the wave. So the fact you do that even faster now, and if Zap doesn't miss, which sometimes it can be a little questionable, but when he doesn't, he's kind of on point. And like you said, it wasn't great at the beginning there. He kind of might have entered a couple of times, but once he was getting into the team fight stage, it was kind of hard. And we talked about this last week too. Obey has one strategy. If anyone can work around that strategy, they kind of just fall over, and that's moderately what happened this time. There were a couple of switch ups here and there, with their comps, but it's just kind of all the same. I feel like.
Yeah, speaking of obey strategy, they're still going sort of all in on this burn objectives, don't worry about team fights strategy, kind of. Which I guess seems to work, but the ISIS has not really, seen the best days in this strategy for sure.
That's technically how you win the game. It's about getting the Titan and all that. That's I think it's just so time sensitive. That kind of play style only works if you can get it done within like 24 minutes or something like that. Take a lead, snowball with it, and start just taking objectives around people. If you don't do that, let's say that you are sieging like my Titan. If you wipe 34 minutes into the game, that's like 50-second timers. We're just want to walk down and take yours. It has a very specific moment where it can shine, and if you don't hit it there, you're not going to hit it at all.
I think the one thing to really look at them with that team too is they were both struggling in objectives and they were struggling in team fights once upon a time. And like if you in the bigger picture, you've got to think of baby steps is kind of how I look at it. And so taking one of those things off the table and go, okay, let's get really good at objectives. You can only improve one thing at a time. If they can get the objectives down and then start to improve on the team fight in aspect, it's easier. I mean, if you're getting good at your objectives anyway, your gold differential is going to make it easier for those team fights. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's not an easy task though, and I know they've had an uphill battle. And they've had a battle all year, if I'm honest. But at the same time, like it's good to see some improvements and what their goals are. You know what I mean? Even the fans, even you guys, everyone can identify what their strategy is. Right. And even if it doesn't work, at least you can see the method to their madness.
Yeah, I don't know that it doesn't work. I just think it might be a little bit one-dimensional.
That's the big key. Yeah, it does work, but yeah, it is one-dimensional. Yeah,
and I think that's also a bit of the point. Like to your credit there, Hindu, you said neither the team fights or the objective fights were working out well. Early on in phase 1 and even early on in phase 2. So the fact that they're able to say like, hey, we can focus on this and potentially, win games, win sets, learn things about our team fight from just focusing solely on doing objectives and things like that, to at least put us in a position where we can maybe have some even fights, to learn about what we can do in these sort of chaotic environments. Because I think the objective fights are a little more designed and choreographed, I think, than just some of these team fights that happen naturally in jungle corridors and things like that.
Exactly. And I think that's a big key with Obey there, is that when you look at that team and what they've gone through with Sino joining the team and things, they've really been looking for whether, to an extent, in my view, without hearing their comms, it feels like the leadership. You know what I mean? Like there's no one really shot calling in team fights, but it's very easy to have someone shot call and go, let's go Gold Fury, and everyone to raise their hand and go, aye, let's do Gold Fury.
Oh, yeah, that'll be
when it gets to a team fight situation, it's so chaotic and the leadership may be lost there, or people's direction isn't as focused. It's hard to micromanage on the comms to an extent of what's going on there compared to an objective which is more static. So it makes a lot of sense to me to get better at the objectives first, get those under control and go, okay, how do we push on from there? If we can't team fight still, maybe we look for pick comps. We're going to get a pick, go for an objective, get a pick, go for an objective, and then keep the map split up and stop the enemy team. But then you've also run the risk of, again, it being one-dimensional, like you were saying, which is everyone knows you're going to do that every time, so they don't get themselves picked.
And I think it's actually kind of especially hard to, like you say, like work the kinks out in such a methodical manner in what I think most people consider is quite a heavy dive meta too, because, there's just no room for your carries to breathe most of the time if the other team is really diving them well.
I think they chose the wrong team to practice this against. To me, the Knights are, the way that they play objectives is probably like the most aggressive, the most punishing. These are the guys that will drop a fire giant at like 200 health just to fight you. If they know that you wasted this, and this on a Gold Fury, they're going to go in on you. Yeah, Ghosts do that as well. But if they had been doing this against, say, like a Sanguine and Renegades, they don't really punish after the fact. It's sort of, okay, it's gone. Let's go back to our lanes. Let's do whatever. But PK, what's missing? All right, let's go in. They used Isis Soul. All right, let's go in.
Yeah. Any final thoughts about this set before we move on to the next set of the week?
Not really. I mean, it kind of went as expected, It was definitely a weird week as well in the SPL because obviously, most of the games didn't really matter. It was kind of a send off to the season 7 SPL. I can't believe it's already over, dude. I can't believe it's November now. It's crazy. Time has flown. But yeah, I mean, it was a fun weekend, but it was definitely a lot more light-hearted from the players for the most part.
Lermy, Frost, any final thoughts?
No,
I'm
I
just
think that was
hoping
it.
they show up a little bit more dimensional, I guess is the word that we've been
Sure,
using.
yeah.
Dimensions.
Qualifiers.
Let's get to 2 dimensions at least, right?
Little 2 dimensions there. I mean, I like the thinking. That was a heavy. Game 1 was a heavy mitigations comp. You got Isis, Osiris, Amaterasu. There's logic behind it. There is reasoning to the madness. I just don't know how they expected it. It comes down to execution, surely.
Surely.
Yeah.
Surely.
I mean, just looking at that comp there, like that, what you talk about Isis, Kumba, Amaterasu, Osiris, Rama, like what, 3 really good frontliners, and what's supposed to happen there? Bobby's supposed to sit on the back line and peel realistically with the help of Isis or Isis self peels. It really is just judging the comp based off the comp more than anything else and what it's up against a lot of the time. I really feel like Assault has trained me so well by just looking at 2 Assault teams and going, this one's gonna win, and then realizing afterwards it's gonna win. Because you're like, yep, that's how it'll play out based off these gods in game.
Sounds about right. There's Assault mains know things we don't.
Listen, a wise man has once seen a Vulcan take on a Geb in a 1v1, right? I'm like, I've seen some stuff.
All right, let's move on to the next set of the week, which was Ghost versus Radiance. I think Radiance, held their own, especially in game 1. First Blood, I'm reading here, wasn't until 11 minutes into the game, and it was kind of a slow pace with Radiance, taking the lead in gold sometimes, but, Ghost were able to fight back into it, win some late game team fights, and actually they 2-0 this set. I think it was back and forth in both of the games, but Ghost are able to hold on to win this. I don't think there is too much really to say here. I think both these teams might have been basically locked in their positions as far as playoff goes. Is that correct?
I will. Yeah, their seeding was pretty locked, but I would almost say to the contrary that there's not bad blood, but there is the tension between these two. Radiance comes in looking unbeatable. Ghost are the first ones to stop them. Then Ghost are the hot boys. They kind of self-destruct in a way, but Radiance also puts them in their place. It comes down to the top 3: Ghost, Radiance, SSG. SSG has shown that they can't really hold a candle to Ghost. If Radiance can't do anything, Ghost takes the entire league for free. So honestly, they're not just playing for themselves, they're playing for the rest of the league, showing that Ghost don't get to just run away with it, but it's shown at first playoffs, and that every matchup, aside from the one where they were self-destructing, Radiance kind of does fall flat in the end, but they tend to be really close, like they're just right there, and right at the end is where he gets taken from them.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the total kills for the set, and it was 28 kills for Ghost and 25 for Radiant. So it really was quite an even matchup back and forth.
Yeah.
Sorry for cutting you off there, Hindu.
Oh, no, you're good. I was just going to follow what Frost was saying, because I completely agree. I mean, if you think about the Pro League this year, Radiance and Ghost were the 2 teams that everyone was like, oh, yes. Like, sure, you had PK, they just won Worlds, right? But they've got a roster change, and they lost Sam, so how would they be? You also have, the Renegades, or the SSG, it was former Renegades. But yeah, the SSG squad, they come back again, underperform. But the big 2 that everyone was looking at was Ghost at the start of the year and Radiance at the start of the year, because Radiance was seen as the super team in quotation marks, as everyone calls it. But at the same time, they've struggled, and I think Ghost, they're always going to be close matches between those 2, in my opinion. Like, even if they do go one way or another, which, let's be honest, Ghosts have had a much better time of it up against Radiance than Radiance the other way around. But I think Radiance has just, in fairness, Radiance has struggled since halfway through this split, in my opinion. I think they've really been starting to gather ground again, but I think that would just be a real stumbling block that Ghost gave them this week. Even though it was like not that important, honestly, overall, it still was something that both teams really would have vied for. And I think what Frost was saying is exactly right. Like, these 2 have a bit of an animosity just because they were both seen as the top 2 coming into the start of the year. It's a big game for both of them.
An unusual game too.
Oh, go ahead, Frost. Go ahead.
Just how you've got Aurora, you've got PBM, that are known as the WQ tanks, just full on run you down, but that just was slow going.
Yeah,
very uncharacteristic of either Ghost or Radiance, and it was just tension from it. But I think even more uncharacteristic from Ghost, seeing as we have talked to Slaney, we have talked to a lot of the players where they think that they know how to play Smite as it's supposed to be played. They think that the others played a little bit slower, but they're just not quite there yet. This is Ghost not slowing down as in like showing their age or getting tired out, but almost as if they've found some form of humility in a way, like that bullheadedness is kind of gone, and they're going, yeah, our way is more fun, but playing like this almost guarantees us the wins.
Yeah, early game, like when you get that tension that Frost is talking about, right, in those first 10 minutes, it normally means something's on the line. And for Radiance, I feel like there was a big point of like Ghost didn't want to make a misstep, because if you're honest, Ghost has made some missteps this phase. They've done a lot of issues in their late game with throwing games by having too much fun or allowing teams back into games that should have been over. Whereas, against Radiance, it's kind of a tip of the hat to both teams of like, we'll give you respect in the early game. If you're not going to make a mistake, we're not going to try and punish you for it because there's no mistake to be punished. So it becomes a bit of a back and forth, and those games are always interesting as a caster, like from an analyst point of view, because you're like, okay, we've got no first blood. It's either gonna pop off as soon as that first kill happens, and it's a bloodbath until the end of the game, and we're done in 25 minutes, or we're going to 90 minutes here, and that's either way. You just don't know at any given moment.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat of like that school of thought, right? These two teams coming at each other, I mean, they have to be calculated and respectful, which we didn't really see that previously. I feel like, as mentioned, they've made mistakes before where they haven't given as much respect, and they're kind of learning from that. They're saying, okay, whenever the door is open, we'll take it, but we're not going to try and force the door open. We're going to really be calculated, and then that's where the ghost troll comes through. And once they open the door, they kind of all pile in, right? They just take every advantage they can. And Radiance this time just didn't really super have an answer to it. I feel like their comps were also kind of weird. Like, we haven't really talked about that at all, but we're seeing like Kabrakan come back out. I mean, like, he's a cool character for sure, and Set's been all over the place too. Like, that character is nuts on another level, it seems.
It's good to see Kabrakan back. I think Kabrakan's a little bit sleepy. He's a little bit flexible too. I mean, I'm pretty sure the first time we saw him this phase, and you guys might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was a Roaring Support was the first one that picked it up again.
I believe so.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's kind of back in the jungle here all there too, just being played around with again. I think Kabrakan's been not underrated, because I think his recent buff towards the tremor damage has really helped him out a little bit in that early game, which has allowed him to be viable. But also Baron Samedi, following what Lermy was saying, like we saw Twig pick that up in the mid lane, and like he's had some consistent buffs to try and get him there, because once upon a time he was definitely a little bit overtuned. But it's good to see like he's got a bit of love, and movement speed on him with Doom Orb makes a lot of sense. Baron with mobility is something to be feared, not only because he can get in range with not just his abilities, but also with that coffin. More importantly, he can also disengage. So
you were talking about sleeper picks, Baron is definitely one of them. We mentioned it briefly last week, but Baron actually has one of the highest win rates in Diamond Plus ranked right now. So it's like he's genuinely doing mad damage. 2 more builds are helping him out so much, and just that little bit of extra healing, slow cleanse, like all of that utility coming from a character, and especially with the way that Ghost plays, it works so well with their style. Just having that extra bit of support to keep them healing up, going faster, whatever it might be.
Sure.
I think the funniest thing about like gods like Baron, for example, like in an average player's hands, it's tricky because you have to hit every ability to be good with him, and that's the key. Whereas if you're a pro player and you've got this, you have to take, and this is one thing that the pros always told me from the early days of like season 1 of like, you have to predict that every player is going to hit everything, because in the pro league they probably will. So that's what you have to factor in, all these abilities. As a casual, you're not going to see the Baron hit the whole 1-2-3 combo on you. In the pro league, they will, and then you'll disappear. So it's good to see like the variations available with some of those gods like that.
Speaking of that, I think it's even more impressive when people dodge abilities in the pro league, because of what you just said there. Especially we see the hunters do it at Zap. I think is famous for just dodging things, not using the beads, holding on. So,
I mean, most of the time in the pro league, we see the other end of the spectrum, and it doesn't happen too often. But we see like the Sam for soccer that catches a blinking Sun Wukong in midair and pulls him back in, and you're like, wait, what? Like, they don't happen too often, but when they do, they make your jaw drop. Like, seriously, The most famous one of those I remember was Game Hunter in season 1. He once threw his hammer randomly, in my opinion, but he predicted where the dude was going to jump to, and he hit him with the double tap on the way back and killed him. I'm just like, that's crazy. I don't know how you can predict that much. These pros are mad. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that is
those
crazy.
ones are always good.
Speaking of Sam, I did just want to point out that he played Tsukiyomi in both of these games. I think in the Pro League especially, we've sort of seen Tsukiyomi be very hot and cold. I think Kubo had a couple good games on him, but then Adapting had some very weird games on Tsukiyomi, and other players really haven't had too much success. What are your thoughts on Tsukiyomi? I mean, I think he's been in the Pro League now for maybe 4 or 5 weeks. What is the impact that he's had on the league so far?
God, I think he's got like the best 1v1 of almost any character in the game, but he's also easily countered by getting jumped on. Which is, it sounds obvious. Oh, every character dies when they get jumped on, but we're also in the middle of a dive meta. So while he is very strong, it's also not a good time to be him, but he still overcomes it in a way if your team can work on it. And I always said, Sam, as a player, has some of the most ridiculous 1v1s. They leave him on a Phoenix alone to just solo whoever he wants on defense or offense, and now they give him one of the better sort of dueling characters.
Right.
It's just absolutely nuts. But I think the hardest thing for a Tsukiyomi is to sort of being able to target out players, and that's where the success rate on it's going to hinge.
Absolutely. I mean, especially into Nemesis is we were building the Sino build, Executioner, and all of that. That's such an ultimate counter, just being able to disarm them. And the Nemesis that has one other ability that she can hit you with kind of looks at you like, oh shit, I'm just gonna get hit with this stun. I'm gonna get comboed. It's GG at that point. It's especially also good against Set, which is super meta right now. So really, it's kind of a counter. It sits in that spot where yes, he's new, so not everyone is perfect with him yet. Not all of the like super hidden mechanics have been figured out of like who you should be shooting at when to make sure you're at the best spot. I'm sure people are just shooting to shoot at this point, and they end up under tower by accident. You're kind of like, oh well, I'm here now. So you kind of have to deal with that learning process. But I think at the very least there is a very good understanding of when he should be played. And these were both very good games for that.
Sure.
Yeah, I think honestly, from my view of Tsukiyomi, right, he is a cleanup artist when it comes to the end of team fights. Like, if he can time when he turns up at a team fight or when he can start the engagement, fantastic. And as the other two have already said, like his 1v1 potential is amazing. But outside of that, in team fights, the person that I think of the first of all, right, is Lasbra, because Lasbra's jungle is very similar to this of like he wants to kind of wait at the edge of a team fight for the team fight to break out and then turn up and go, surprise, I'm here to murder you all. And that's exactly what Tsukiyomi does. But junglers that like Sam, for example, who normally is an initial engager for a team, it's very interesting to see that stylized play change there because the rest of the team have to kind of rally around and fill out those gaps of like, well, is it now Mike that's going to do more engages? Is it going to be Fine OK engaging for the team to allow Sam to come up late in those team fights? You know what I mean? Because I feel like if Suki's there right from the start, the biggest thing with Tsukiyomi is if you are in the team fight, you are not getting out of the team fight unless you die or they die. It's very AMC-esque. Well, it's not AMC-esque of these days, but old school AMC, I would say. Like that's what he would do. Like you're in the team fight, you will stay in the team fight. So trying to time your windows, it's a tricky task. You are playing an assassin, and he really is a definition of an assassin in my eyes, of that sort of style. I think he's got his place, but good teams, good pro level teams have good ways of shutting him down. And I think you saw some of that, like in game 2, for example, he went 2, 5, and 7, I think, so a bit of an assist spot there.
Yeah.
He struggled a bit more so. And player damage was, what was that? Just checking. Oh, he's not even on there. Ignore me. I was checking stats and he's not even got player damage.
He does have player
But
damage
his
here.
healing was trash, you see.
I was like, his
Right,
healing
weapon
numbers
No,
are
Healing
no,
wrong.
is
no.
0.
I mean, he went quad mace. That's kind of something.
It is
He
something.
did.
I'm
All
not
the
a fan
time.
of it, really not. Yeah, he's got the all-in. It just completely blows somebody up. But he might also not. I've seen that hybrid Suki. It feels like he does just about the same amount of damage while having an
Honestly.
insane amount of survivability.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Love
it's
the
a good,
flash
it's a
shield.
good point. But we'll look for the builds of who he's up against as well in that game that you're talking about there with that Titan's Bane, and yeah, I just don't see the value in it. They've not gone that tanky, honestly. They were more DPS. Interesting.
Yeah, Suki.
Sorry, getting sidetracked in my own mind there, going, interesting.
Suki sort of feels to me like a old school adapting god. I think I recall some casts back in season 2 or season 3 where you guys described adapting's playstyle, sort of waiting for the engagement to break out and then cleaning everybody up.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a very specific adapting playstyle that he does with certain gods. Sir Ket is a good example, and I think one of the things you're probably talking about is one that I'll always remember. I don't know why, but he's just play on Sir Ket against an Ao Kwong, and I think it was adapting versus Cuvo Fred, but he would just lurk and wait for Ao Kwong to show his face and then murder him, and it was like, wow, he just deletes him every time. So yeah, that it's very similar in that sense. I get you.
Yeah, I think that playstyle though is a little bit difficult now, especially with where we are in this sort of dive meta where you like. It feels real. You get punished too much for engaging as the Tsukiyomi, I feel like. So it's a little bit tenuous to be playing him, at least in my games.
That's why I question the builds. But then it also brought us back to joy of sort of classic PBM. He went Gab, he went Kepri.
True.
Very, very supporty. And Sam, since he is he is going to initiate, he's got a Gab Shield or a Kepri ult to get him out of there.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, he also went Gem of Isolation on Capri, which I do advise. Honestly, it's fantastic. Let me tell you, a rolling slow dot from Capri while it's buffing and debuffing them, perfect. It's definitely good to see that. Although I don't agree with the Staff of Murden on the Geb. I'm just going to say that real quick. I don't agree with that bit. That's a bit too far from my.
I don't like double rollouts. Oh.
Listen, when are you going to use that second one? Like, to be fair, I was once upon a time I really wanted Bacchus to be really good with it, but his animations of the belly flop are just too slow and cumbersome to really make use of it. Because I went to go alt flop flop, you know what I mean, or flop alt flop flop. It would have been great. It would have been amazing, but it didn't work out.
Now, if we're theory crafting with the magic power buff that he's about to get, he gets like literally 160 magic power free starting tomorrow.
Listen,
so you
Geb's
double chug.
Listen, wait for Bacchus. Wait for Bacchus in solo lane to come back. It's not happened often. We've seen it very few times, but I think it could be viable again. I swear.
Honestly,
I don't know what the amount of damage it's having 2 shields because they'll burn through the first one. I think it's all right.
What, 2 shield Geb? I don't agree with that. Unless it doesn't make sense. It's not logical in my brain. Maybe double knock up is useful. I can see a world with that, but. Yeah, no, it's not worth.
Especially that. What was it? Where he was against? When he was in, he's up against a nemesis. I'd say getting ulted by a nemesis probably want 2 shields.
But he already had Pridwin anyway, right? So like, if he's got Pridwin, he's already getting.
No, it's not for him.
That's 3 shields, Hindu.
They don't stack though. They don't stack like that. He's basically burning his own shields.
It's kind of strange where I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of the Myrmidon. I like most of the other stuff, like Ethereal's great on him. Stone Binding has been not sleeper, but it's definitely grown on me over the seasons too. The staff is just all awkward. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan.
The only time I ever recommend it is if it's Xing Chen, because double roar into an ADC, they do no damage. Yeah. Completely immune to auto attacks.
Good times.
All right, let's move on to the next set of the week. Sanguine versus Obey. And I think, like most of the other games, this set did not have too much writing on the line here.
Luckily.
Bit of a stomp for the Sanguine boys. They said vamos on their way to playoffs here. Game 1, a little bit more calculated, but Game 2 was a bit of a bloodbath on both sides, with Sanguine ending up with 31 kills. In a pretty short game is what it looks like. Bobby got Yamoja here for the first time, I think. And since phase 1, if I recall correctly. So maybe this was just an experiment?
Maybe, but it just didn't look good, and this time it did.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the biggest takeaway on the Yamoja for me, was like, Bobby's not picked it since phase 1, but this is the right sort of time to pull out that Yamoja again, right? They leave it up, you pick it because the games don't matter, and you try and have a good game on it or show you've improved to put more threat on other teams in the future. You know what I mean? You've got to really think about that threat thing of like, hey, has he got in his god pool? Well, he just picked it and he played pretty well, so we might need to be careful. I mean, some gods take a while for different players to be able to utilize or use very well. Not every pro player picks up every god at the same rate, in my opinion. I think it's very much about play style orientated, and Bobby's an aggressive player, and I think even his Yamoja play, which it's a hard one to try and master in your brain when you're what kind of support play you're going to play with Yamoja, because she's got aggressive zones and then defensive and then utility zones. It's different stages of the game for her too, so it does take a lot more to master, and he definitely did look better on it, that's for sure.
That's what it was, wasn't it? Jake and Bobby. Was it? Did Jake play one?
I believe Jake played one in the next set.
So,
Jake also
and
picked up.
I remarked on while I was watching, it's like, oh, he's got a Yamoja. After was it? I think Mifflin said he never wants to see Bobby on Yamoja ever again.
I think he had to play it though, just to at least put that little seed of doubt in other teams' minds that maybe we just can't give it to, because Yamoja is pretty much like permaban versus the top teams, I think.
Exactly, and I think if I'm honest, that's the level when a god is top pick, top ban for whatever reason, right? It has to be in a god pool. It has to be someone on the team that can pilot that god specifically, because you can't leave yourself open to be vulnerable to something like that, because you will get abused with it. It means that teams don't have to ban Yamoja themselves, which means you've got to force a ban on Yamoja. And what if you're first pick and not second pick? You don't want to use a Yamoja ban there, do you? You've got other priority targets you're scared of the double pick against. So it's definitely a tricky task for every pro player to understand every god, but when the meta changes, they've got to pick up the pace, and that's a prime example, in my opinion, of Bobby and 408 picking it up too, Jake, just to really show that they do have it in the god pool and continuing to grind at their job for the most part and get better at the whole big picture thing.
It really was a sort of coming of age pick for Bobby here, but how much respect did Sangin really have for it, seeing as they picked Nike into the only character that really just kind of says shields don't exist?
I mean, we don't even need gods for that. You've got Sunder these days. Like, I think Sunder's really slapped on against Nike, funny enough. I don't know why more teams haven't just done that just to remove her from the game, but her viability, I think, is still pretty potent anyway.
They don't like her because you can go full cooldown and you outpace the Sunder.
Yeah.
Essentially. That's like the only nitpicky thing. I still get two Sunders at that point.
And if that's a nitpicky thing of like she can go full cooldown, well, you're forcing her to go full cooldown, right? Just to get that shield up all the time.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, if you can burn through the shield once and kill her, that's what you wanted to do anyway at that moment. You know what I mean? Like, sure, just wait for the relic cooldown again. Yeah, Sunder's OP these days. I don't know why. I don't know why it keeps getting buffed in different ways.
It needs to execute, and then they'll be done with it. But
oh god.
Also, yeah, it just because these matches don't really count for seeding, I think it does have to do more with a bit of a mind game. Sanguine's here going, Wolfie, you're not the only one with a Raw.
Well, Wolfie said, Twig, you're not the only one with an Anubis game too, and it didn't turn out super great for him.
And who was it? PK versus Renegades, where they banned out Venenu's God pool, but essentially banned out Paul's too, as if he didn't want him to copy him or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Listen, that's I'm sure we'll get to it, but that was just wild. Like, even I went wild on that one, and it was kind of fun, but at the same time, like, yep, they're gonna get how many kills was it in 14 to 14? I think it was at 14 minutes in.
God,
yeah,
it was mental.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy.
Wild. And chat's telling me I'm not casting. I'm like, well, you cast this many team fights that mean nothing.
I don't know how I would have done in that circumstance. I literally would be crying at that point.
Any final thoughts on this Obey set? Obey versus Sanguine set before we do move on to the Sunday Fun Day sets, as we're just joking
really
about here?
Good.
Yeah, Shinto is very good.
Shinto is great. Honestly, I want to say it real quick, because like the Sanguine boys, like, what a year they've had, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Like, in fairness, when they came into the league, and even like the Sanguine account on Twitter tweeted it straight after the weekend, going, "Hey, the casters, like said, would be lucky to get 6." And realistically, when you look at the league and you look at what they were up against this year, 6 was a really good place for them to be if they could get that far. Ending 3rd in Phase 2 and having such a good run in Phase 1, I was concerned after Phase 1 because Phase 1 went so well for them. The problem was they got a target on their back for a second, and it made teams really dial in and study them and learn where they're strong and weak. So Phase 2, I was concerned of Sanguine falling further down the standings more than anything else, because teams work them out and work out where their weaknesses and strengths were. But I think they've done a really good job of holding their own and still being creative. This is a team that, for my liking, that Latam team, could have gone pro years ago at
Sure.
one point in time. So it's good to see them get a shot through Sanguine and Cakeman and really put it to good use. Like, nobody's making meme jokes about Sanguine anymore. These Latin boys are slapping kids. It's great.
Yeah,
Well,
I
they
know.
really put that low.
Yeah, I know when I interviewed Shinto last week, he said they basically expected 6th place. And they were pretty much just as surprised that they were winning all these games and were able to get 1st place in the first phase. So
Yeah.
I think, and obviously that first phase must have been a huge confidence boost for them, just
Oh,
to say,
definitely.
like, you know, hey, we're here and we actually can compete, and you know, we're right there at the same level as a lot of these teams.
Sure. I mean, it's also been a crazy year too, with obviously with the coronavirus and everybody working from home and the pandemic. It definitely put some question marks in my head personally, because I obviously have been around the scene a long time, right?
Mhm.
So Sanguine, in theory, all they really did was move to America and sit in a house and video game online, right?
Yep.
Which is very much what they were doing from LATAM anyway. They didn't go into the studio, they didn't have all the LAN games. And that, for me, is an interesting factor going into potentially next year of like, let's all hope everything clears up, right? But if we go back to studio and we're all back and everyone's going well, how do they go into the LAN every single day? Do they start to falter now because they're having to play in a different setup in a different area? Sure, their home would moved, but it's different being at LAN versus being in the comfort of your own apartment or place, you know. And I think that was a benefit to Sanguine this phase. And this year, but I'm excited to see how that goes next year, because I think some teams have suffered because of that this year, for sure.
Sure. All right, let's move on to Sunday Fun Day, as I had mentioned, with PK versus RNG. And Hindu was just waxing poetic a little bit ago about how many kills were in this game and how there were too many for him. And was it you and Agro on the cast?
Yeah, Agro knew this was going to be bad for some reason. Excuse me, and tweeted out like, "I'm going to troll Hindu," and I'm like, "Why are you going to troll me for? It's not my fault. This is going on." I have no idea why I put myself on that cast. But I guess it was just my, good service, and I was owed one by the Smite gods to have to do a really stupid set like that. It was fun. Let's be honest. The players had fun with it. They were kind of being very loose and aggressive, overly
Sure.
so was the casting. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I think everyone knew it was sort of a fun match, especially when Neil locks in the tier support and things like that. And Zap going 1-11 on Cupid.
You can see it in their faces, man. Like the jokes that you were making about, like, oh, Bear is frowning for the first time. I mean, I was losing it in my seat watching that.
Yeah, so the tweet, just so you guys know, if you didn't get to catch this one, game 1, 13 minutes and 18 seconds, Renegades had died 14 times, and Pittsburgh Knights had died 14 times. Pittsburgh Knights had 2 towers down, and were down only 400 gold. That's the game. That's the state of affairs at 30 minutes in. And by that point, me and Ryan have gone, yeah, I'm not casting all these silly fights that are going on because they're just having fun. So let's just be loose too. It's always nice when we get some loose games though. Like, I don't think we get chance in the regular season enough to really have some fun with the pros.
Sure.
And let them do an all-star event and stuff like that sometimes. Like, let them, hang loose and have a bit of fun. Because it really shows just how good these guys can be when they're playing just chilly and try to do a cool play rather than play to win, which is what happens in the Pro League. You can really get to see some like extra cool abilities and like little nuanced plays that can come out, and that's always the fun stuff.
I'm just waiting for someone to do the Susano Heroin tick. That needs to happen.
God, in the mid lane, not again. While it was very lighthearted, there was also a bit of a shadow overcast from this. In a way, Knights kind of said, we could throw a game to you and still beat you. And you could definitely see in the cams, maybe it's just because of daylight savings time, and the day was getting darker, but especially on Variety, it's as if the man was getting smaller and smaller in his seat. He was getting rather upset.
Like, not with it or something. It's like, my whole team's having fun, but can I go eat dinner now? I genuinely...
I mean, it was game 3 he was playing Sobek, right? Like, how much fun are you going to have on Sobek? Game 2 that, what was it? What did it end up going in game 2? He went 1-8 in game 2.
He went Guan.
Yeah, but he had fun on Guam. That's the difference, right?
That's true.
How much fun on solo Sobek can you really have?
Especially with your...
That's kind of his pick, too. He likes to play that.
Well,
Does he?
especially,
I guess.
Especially when your Neja support is going all Intel mode here, 2-11 for
God.
Jake. So
You're also against Amaterasu in lane, so you ain't killing no one.
yeah, just
So the glory.
With no damage on the ground aside from, I guess, a Kabrakan. Yeah, that Naja is not dropping anyone into damage.
it was a bit of a weird draft in game 3. Let's just leave it at that. Is there anything meaningful we can maybe glean from these games? I know there's a lot of fun and things like that, but is there anything that
take away?
That you can take away or that points to what we can see in playoffs or qualifiers or worlds?
I think the biggest thing it really is to just give credit to for Renegades, I should say, of like kind of bouncing back a little bit. The split, like they were struggling just like a United were, and I think a lot of people had touted E United to rise in standings with the adjustments they made. Baskin coming on the team, Snoopy back to ADC, but I just don't think they had enough time in the oven, honestly, to really get themselves up to speed. I think the biggest thing for me was Baskin still needed work in solo, and like it's not that he's a bad player, it's not that he could like potentially be one of the greatest in that role again. It's just he's been so long out of being out of that lane that I think it took him a little bit of time to adjust, and he's still getting there. If they would have put him mid, potentially they could have just hit the ground running, but then they would have had knock-ons elsewhere on the team. So I think the biggest thing was, from Renegade's point of view, to stay and slowly improve throughout the year, especially with their roster changes too, because they lost Solo or Troll. And I think since it's been interesting to see, like, have they done better? Have they not? And I still think that's a question that a lot of people still have, especially the Solo or Troll fans, of whether that was a good trade for them.
Yeah. Ross, Lermy, any thoughts on what we can take away from this set at all?
Assassin supports can stay on the shelf.
Assassin supports are fine. It's Naja if you got no damage on the ground.
I mean,
I don't know what you
he's
expect.
the worst character in the game. Do we believe that?
I know plays Osiris jungle.
Are you all
Okay,
ready for
fair.
You all ready for Nox support to get a huge resurgence? By the way,
jungle. It's her time.
No,
I'm
no.
telling you, dude.
Nox support forever. It's gonna
Nox
happen.
support. You could go Mage's Blessing, cooldown boots, and then whatever 20% cooldown item, and then not get any farm for the rest of the game. You're still effective just because of the 2 and the 1.
Honestly, she's going to be so effective. Like that early wave clear help on the level 1. I don't know if she's going to take level 1.
Oh, definitely take a level 1.
I don't think the damage is good enough on the 1 to get it to level 1.
I don't think it is worth getting level 1 unless you're going to go for a kill lane, which is possible.
Go for a
you
kill
can
lane.
go for an aggressive pick, but I think her early game's going to improve, which is going to be important. She's got a bit more pressure in that lane of like clearing creeps out now and to wait for the trouble puddle to just finally explode. I'll just say, I've been pitching the idea of giving it the Scylla tech of letting her explode it, but then she'd be OP and we'd need to
God,
nerf her. Yeah.
you need to stop it. Stick to casting, get away from the dev team.
Listen, you say that, but now I didn't get to say this, but now the 1's gonna have wave clear. That's ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, I think we'll see a lot about Nox support coming through. That's for sure. I think she's definitely going to be viable. Silence is the most powerful thing against junglers and assassins since the dawn of time. Silence is OP. Just remember that. And having a huge AoE circle that you don't have to put down for damage, it's basically a reverse Geb shield, is how you want to look at it, right? If they're diving in and they're going to try and hit your carry and you go, nope. And it's not because you put a shield on your carry, it's because you put a shield under your carry and there's no damage coming anymore. It's great. OP.
In ranked, I was just there were a lot of Thoths and they were getting countered by Fenrir's or just dive meta in general. I picked Nox just because you put the 2 underneath. What are you going to do? There's no ult. There's nothing. I don't even know if he does damage when he lands on a Nox 2. I forget. I know Odin doesn't.
Good question. It probably doesn't then if Odin does it.
I'm not sure that shield's really wonky though. But if we do see more Nox, it's going to be a very specific level the 1 and get upgraded Sunder at the start, because that's what we used to do with this Nox that we have now. If we wanted to kill lane, and now that it does damage, upgraded Sunder, walk up to somebody and just grab them.
I could see it. I mean, the level 1's not too. I mean, it's so quick to level 2 these days, right now, with how the jungle's being started and stuff. Like, I don't think the level 1's that important, but having the 1-2 combo or the 2-1 combo that you could use one for wave clear and one for CC. It's gonna change things up in that lane for sure. Because I think a lot of supports could really have some issues against the Nox. You know what Guardians are like; they hate silences too more than anything.
Yes.
I just don't like saying that live because I'm a support player, so I don't want them to know that silences delete Guardians.
I mean, I'll still go beats. I'm a support player. I would, no shame. Selfish items for my team.
You know, it's not often I do it, but there's now and again I will get beads on a Guardian, and most of the time it's probably against something like that. Yeah.
Here's what I'll say. Neil swear that him getting beads on Kepri won him Worlds last year. So
Yeah, because they can't stop your ult. There are some. So, okay, this is a bit of a meme because I'll go like Kali support and I'll chat's like, what are you doing? This here is a support keen size and hastened for the team. But no, there are some items that are specifically for a selfish playstyle, but it keeps you like around for the team and you can help them out more.
Mm-hmm.
And Magi's, well, that thing gets popped so easy, but a beads that I can use whenever I want to so that I can make sure my defense or whatever, my peel is working when I need it to. That's just so strong.
And it's one of the reasons why, like, Magi's in certain comps can be good, but it's really dependent on, like, that's when you look at team comps and go, how much hard CC have they got? Because if they've only got, like, one major ability, Magi's can be amazing, you know? So it really, like, factors in. But yeah, beads can be good on support sometimes. I'm not a huge fan, but I understand when and where for the most part. And it's normally those first 10 levels, A, because they're going to try and pick you over and over again while you're squishy, or B, it's in the late stage fight where you need those beads to make sure you can get your abilities off to save teammates.
Any final thoughts on this set before we get to the last set of Phase 2? I guess not of Season 7 because there's still Worlds and things like that, but any final thoughts?
Regular season's over, that's what we can say, right? Like, regular season's over. And it was more of a celebration the whole day, but no, nothing on that one. Last one was SSG, right?
Yeah. The last set of the week was SSG versus United, a really spicy one from the Space Station boys here. They role swapped everything. I think Nico was ADC, Dardes went back to his support roots, right? Rapper had to play mid because
that's the only role left.
That's the only role left. We saw Cherry in the solo lane, and we saw Vote in the jungle. And Vote actually looked pretty good. I think he carried on Ao Quang.
Vote loves jungle. He loves Ao Quang. That's all he does in ranked. It's just jungle.
10-0.
Yeah, he did.
So.
He did kind of pop off on that Ao Quang, I'll be honest. It's definitely another threat now. But the funny thing is the community now all going, shouldn't Vote just play this in the ADC role, man? Like, what do you think? Should he just, like, pick this there? I mean, we see Set in ADC for Cyclone. Can't Vote just do the same thing and pop off now? And I'm like, yeah, but no. What are you going to put him with to help him clear in that early game? Like, no, you're not going to have a fun time there.
It's not fun.
Sylvanas.
God, no.
I don't think that would be even enough because when Sylvanas is there clearing, they're just going to kill Sylvanas. And laugh. What's Ao Quang going to do to stop them killing the Sylvanas, you know?
Yeah, they definitely lean heavily into the Sunday Funday vibe. I think with Cherry picking Alposh solo in game 2 and literally
shouts to Cherry for that
over and over and over again. So
I appreciate the SPL players as well, just making a whole agreement that nobody likes Alposh. So when he does get in a game, they will just murder him to remind them not to pick this god. And it's a rule that everyone's okay with, you know? Even SSG were okay with it because they didn't help him out in that lane at all.
True.
They just left him and went, that's Alposh.
Yeah.
That's what happens to him. Yeah. No, I think it was also like for their mental health. You've got poor Nika doesn't even want to play Amaterasu anymore. You've got to give him something a little different, something to de-stress before he's got to go back in play Amaterasu again for playoffs and Worlds.
Yeah, so give him the ROM and the Jingweis and those sorts of things, right?
Yeah, it's definitely always. I love the final game. Sometimes can be the most fun for me because they're so serious through the year. These players, letting them be able to get loose and just have a bit of fun when there's nothing riding on it is really important to me. I think the worst thing is when one team doesn't have anything to play for and one does, because one's trolling and one's tryharding, and it's like, oh, this is kind of awkward now, especially if the trollers are still winning when the other team's tryharding, and you're like, oh no, please don't do this to them. It's embarrassing. But yeah, I think it was a good example of two different teams with two different mindsets, funny enough, because I think EU Night kind of adopted to the style that SSG went for and kind of went with the fun. But at the start, I think you saw EU United really trying hard to improve because they've still got work to do, you know?
Right.
So it made sense to me to see this set be a bit weird at the start and then progressively get worse as the series went on.
Sure. I don't really have too many notes about this set other than because, again, like the last set, how much can you really glean from these sets where people are role swapping and things like that,
But here's what you can glean, right? If the whole roster of Space Station Gaming had to rosters change within themselves, this is where they'd probably end up, I think, is what we're talking about here. So.
I think we knew this before. I'm pretty sure Aggro asked either Cherry or Vote or maybe both of them about this. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure they had a big discussion about who would play what role. Yeah, I remember that. I would like to see Rafa back in the jungle again. It's been too long. I'm just saying. I just want to see him again from the old days.
He basically plays jungle with the way he plays support anyhow.
Listen, when he first became a support player, I remember a Thanatos start that he did once, and we only saw that once, thank God. But that didn't work out so well.
I want them to keep doing that. They're just not brazen enough for it. I don't know. In the end, though, someone did have to win out of all these sets, even if they were basically exhibition matches.
Yeah,
I think that's as much information as you're going to get. Is
and I think
a bit of foreshadow.
The long-term viewers and the ones who know the scene well and has been around a bit probably enjoy those more than the casuals that are looking to pick something up because they're like, why are these guys messing around and they're getting paid to do this? And it's like, no, we see these guys go hard at it time in and time out. This is them kind of letting loose for a second, and you can have a lot more fun with it by just being that way. So
kind of surprised Dardas didn't pick up the Nox support, the old Dardas special. The Bruise Brothers. Isn't that the Bruise Brothers special?
Well, he had to
way
win
back in the day.
Oh baby, the Bruise Brothers, yeah. He was. I mean, Dardas. Funny enough, before Dardas came on the scene, right? Like in the very, very early days, I used to always talk with the EU guys like Lobster and like Trix and like just go, hey, what's going on in the EU? Because I moved to the US, obviously. Right. So I'd always be like, who's the up and comers in the EU right now? Like, who are the guys you keep an eye on? And like the one guy's name that came up back then was Dardas. They were like, yo, keep an eye on that guy. Like, he's really good. And I'm like, really? Okay. What's he playing? He goes, he plays support. And I'm like, interesting. I was like, okay, let's see how he does. And like when he first came on the scene, I was like, I don't see anything special. Oh my God, him and Jermaine are popping off here. This is crazy. So yeah, that was the good old days. And when you think about it, he's been with Cheerio for quite a while now. Yep. So yeah, it's good to see Cheerio doing well still.
It is good to see Cheerio doing well.
Yeah. That's all I had. Sorry, I just got a sidetrack about Dardas, no reason.
Okay. We love the tangents and sidetracks here on the SPL Rundown.
Yeah, that's a question for later, I think, that I have for you, based on up and comers and whatnot.
Sure.
You just got me on that idea.
Is there
always a good one?
Anything else about this set we need to talk about, or should we wrap it up here?
I don't see anything else there. Nope, I think we're good.
No, nothing would have changed. The builds were about as troll as the picks and swaps. I don't think anyone would take this as information. It's just nice to see them having fun because in the end they are playing a video game.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. And it's almost confusing where the chat's like, "What's happening? What are they doing? Fun? What is fun? What is this fun matter you speak of?"
Sure. Well, now that we're done with the regular season for Phase 2, I think it's time maybe we just run through really quickly what people's power rankings are. There's probably going to be like a pretty distinct top 5, I imagine, and a pretty distinct top 3 as well. So maybe we'll just have sort of an open discussion. Is Ghost sort of your guys' number 1? Maybe is that a consensus?
I'll go last because I have a very odd, method brackets. I don't know.
Sure. You want to start us off here, Lermy? What is your sort of ranking looking like?
It's tough to say because Ghosts definitely have been performing at the top pretty consistently throughout the year, and of course they have had their troll moments where they slip up a little bit here and there, but it's very close for me between Ghosts and SSG. I genuinely think that this is when SSG has absolutely just been knocking out of the park in basically every set. And it's going to be all about, whatever this world's meta ends up turning into. So whatever they adapt to, I could maybe even see them taking the top. And it's very hard for me to pick, honestly. But if we're talking about right here, right now, I'm going to say Ghost. If we're going, a patch or two down the line when it's World's time, I might say SSG.
What about, you want to just quickly give us, your ranking 1 through 10?
Right now we've got
eight. There's not 10.
Oh, eight.
10,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Oh,
I'm
those are the
sorry.
last 10. Dignitas and Paradigm right at the bottom.
My bad. One through
Anyway.
8.
We've got Ghost 1, SSG 2, Radiance 3, Sanguine 4, Knights 5, Renegades 6, E United 7, Obey 8.
How about for you guys, Hindu Frost? Is that where you guys are generally aligning?
It's pretty similar. I mean, honestly, from through the year, I had a big belief that there was a top four, bottom four. And there is. It's funny enough, it's gone the same way in the standings as is right now going into playoffs. At the start of the year, I was like, that's the top four, that's the bottom four, clear as day. But I will say that, like, throughout the year, that they kind of molded brackets almost, you know what I mean? Of like whether it was a top four, bottom four. It kind of went for a little while into a 3-3-2, you know what I mean? In terms of
Sure.
a split breakdown for these teams.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'll be honest, I think we're in more of a 2-4-2 situation where top two are definitely Ghost and Space Station for me. I think that will really come down to Worlds on the day. If those guys face off against each other, who's going to have it? If they even meet each other, because last time they were due to meet, PK turned up and destroyed everyone, or SK back then. But I think Ghost and Space Station are in the top two. I then think you fall into the 4 group bracket, and I'm putting Renegades in there because I think Renegades are part of that 4 group now that could take games. But I think it's going to be tricky for them. Sanguine, Radiance, PK. I am edging at the moment Radiance over Sanguine, heading into playoffs and heading towards Worlds a little bit more. And then PK and Renegades after that. I think PK will do well if they can just get a good weekend like they did at Worlds last year, if I'm honest. I think Radiance has the ability to play off momentum. However, one bad loss and that could go downhill real quick, it feels like to me. So for my money, it's Ghost of Space Station top 2, Radiant Sanguine, PK Renegades, and then E United Obey. So close-ish to what Lermy's saying, really.
I think that's exactly what Lermy had as well.
I just don't hard lock a team. That's the difference because I'm so used to this at this point. Like Space Station goes any given day, dude. Any given day, those dudes. I would like to see them play a marathon across 4 days, right?
Like a good old-fashioned test cricket match.
How about yes, dude? Yes. So let's think about this, right? Across 5 days, they play a best of 5 every day across 5 days.
You're trying to kill these people.
Listen, I gotta cast that, so I'm like, sure, if I can cast it, they can play it. Yeah, let's think about that. A best of 5 days in a row.
That'll be
and the winner, the one who comes out ahead of those best of 5. So if you win the first 3 days, you don't have to play the last 2 days. You've already won it. So that could be fun.
Could be fun.
Different format. What do you know?
All right, Frost, you teased us.
Let's do all the games on the same day while we're at it. Jesus.
Well, I mean, hello. Have you not seen how many games we do at the moment? It's crazy. The year's gone by. In my opinion, though, what we should do is just cut the team down to 2 leagues and then just do that every week.
Right,
but then give them a bench of players. You know what I mean? Like they've got a rostered bench of
swap players out.
We can mix them. It's like, okay, fine, okay, he's clearly tired. Bring out Nika with the amateur roster. Let's go.
That could be pretty interesting. All right, Frost. You said you had a hot take here about power ranking, so I'll open it up to you. What's your take on where the teams stand?
I've got these weird ones, and oddly enough, it's not changed that much since the start because I did do those SPL videos, so I obviously had to rank them then and then sort of kind of update as we went along. But it comes down to it, and yes, fanboy, but also like I've been watching the SPL for 7 some years, and I just not got it down to a science because I just can't deal with the numbers and all that. But it's gonna go Ghost in the number 1, just locked there because I don't think SSG can handle them. Radiance have shown that they do have that slight ability to be able to take them on, but I think they're just closer to SSG skill wise. So those are going to be Ghost at the top, number 1, but then 2 and 3 are going to be SSG and Radiance interchangeably.
Sure.
Then I've got Sanguine PK interchangeably. PK, I think, though, is a little bit stronger, has a little more of a solid mentality of how they want to play the game. Sanguine is a kind of, we take the game as it comes to us. We think 2 moves ahead, whereas I feel like PK really have their entire plan plotted out for the entire match. Then from there, you've got just the Renegade boys, United, Obey. I think we'll leave them as the standings go with Renegades, United, and Obey. And it's kind of unfortunate. You said bottom four, top four is how you had it initially, Hindu. To me, it's going to be Sanguine's the cutoff. Sanguine is how you play in the SPL. Maybe this is kind of harsh. This is the epitome of a bottom seed team.
Hmm.
And we've got three outliers that kind of, for unfortunate circumstances or for their just roster changes or Corona, anything, you know, just shouldn't have cut it. I'm going to be, I guess, like Simon in America's Got Talent or whatever it is. Those three to me just would not have been here. They could try again next year once they've got it all sorted out. But Sanguine is well deserved, should be here, but also bottom of those standings. And Renegades, United, Obey, they kind of got to figure themselves out. They're going to have a really rough time with the playoffs.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that as well for us. Because, like, honestly, when I said the top four, bottom four at the start of the year, I would have classed Sanguine as being part of the bottom four, alongside Obey, alongside E United, and alongside Renegades. I think PK, Ghost, SSG, and Radiance were definitely my top four heading into the year, where I'm like, this is going to be the top four, in my opinion. But then the season plays out, you know, and then roster changes happen. United, Obey struggle. I think Renegades have struggled with roster changes too. Those three teams alone, like, you can see that the fact that they've had so many roster changes or changes to their squads shows that they're trying to make a difference. They realize they're going down the wrong path, right? And I think a lot of people had views of those teams coming into the start of the year, but all three of them have made strides to try and improve, just not maybe at the rate that everybody wanted them to. And so that's why they find themselves in the bottom three. And I think Sanguine's always going to be solid, but I always wonder what happens with Sanguine if they want to replace a member ever. Do they ever need to replace a member? And if they do, are they going to go to the LATAM pool or are they going to go elsewhere? I'm excited about seeing that, honestly, if that ever does happen.
Sure. All right, so I'm basically all out of questions here. I know Frost had some thoughts and comments that he wanted to ask you about, Hindu. So I think we'll just open it up to maybe a general discussion. You know, if anyone has any topics that they want to talk about, feel free to shout them out, and, you know, maybe we'll just talk. Maybe keep it kind of quick, maybe 10 minutes or less, because, you know, it's crunch time for me. So,
all right, Frost, what you got?
You've been here throughout all of it. You've seen players come and go.
Oh, yeah.
What's like? How can you tell when a rookie's going to have staying power? How can you tell? Because there's always roster changes, always new people.
That's such a weird question. It's such a hard question to answer too, right? Because, like, the first word I want to give you is swagger, right? And I know that's going to sound like a really weird word, but, like, when you look at a player from, I look from the point of view of above them the entire time, right? So I just see this overhead view, but their position and the way that they position themselves or step up can almost give me a swagger style of, like, they have balls of steel, and that's what you need to succeed sometimes. Or they just seem to read the game really well. They're always in the right place at the right time. Or they do a very minute, like a minutia of a sort of situation of, like, wow, if he didn't use that shield exactly then, that person would have died. You know what I mean? Like, he timed it to get that ability off. And you just see those minute things and go, you know what, this guy's got it. I honestly don't know how I could, like, really put a finger on exactly when I know someone's got it or not. Because I'll be honest, I didn't know anything about Jake coming into this year, so I was very much I don't know, I'll see how he plays. A lot of people were very down on him of, like, he's a rank troll, and, like, he plays the crazy stuff and people are going to get very annoyed with him. And so my initial tendency on Jake, for example, was, okay, I'm expecting a troll. And he started off that way in a weird way of, like, his picks were wild, then unconventional. Did some of them work? Sure. Could there have been better picks? Yes. But as the season's gone on, like, he's grown in that role, and his ability to handle the situation has kind of shown. He's still got definitely some of that W key mentality that's not good for him. But some of the other players that have come through the year, I think the biggest one for me that I really put a finger on early was Neilmar. And funny enough, he brought that up on Twitter, which I forgot all about when I turned around to him after Worlds and went, just so you know, I think next year's going to be really good for you. And he ended up winning that year after. Because I really did see a lot in Neilmar of, like, it's not just their play, though, that I want to talk about there when I talk about, like, they have the ability. It's also their attitude behind the scenes sometimes. And I'm not saying you have to have an attitude of making videos or being a public facing personality, right? It's more the way you have conversations with people, intermix with other groups of people, and like just generally present yourself to an audience, you know? And if you've got like a sort of calming nature, or you can get on in a lot of good situations, you'll know you're going to have a successful career in something that relies a lot on teamwork, if I'm honest, you know? You can have a lot of raw mechanical skill at the game, but if you can't say the words beads are down, look out, there is a rotation coming, you're going to have a bad time. Yeah, it's a good question though. And all I really want to come back to again is just like, it's a swagger thing. Like, I can just see a swag in the playstyle where I'm like, yeah, they can do it. They've got the ability.
Did PBM have the swagger when he first came in through with his Fafnir?
When he first came through, it was with Zapman back in
You
the
can't be a
olden
Zapman
times.
support and not have swagger.
And like, let's be honest about that, right? Like, without even when Mike first came on the scene, I was like, all right, we'll see how he goes. Like, I wasn't too impressed in the early days, but I loved his attitude. His personality was great anyway, right? And that was one of the things that draws me to whether a player can succeed is also attitude. And I think Mike had a great one, even back then. A lot less trolley and a lot more humble and professional, but now he's got an ego and he tweets terrible shit these days. Like, he's an awful man. But hey, but yeah, back when he was with Zap, right? Now, funny enough, it really didn't really click until like this year was kind of coming around. I was really thinking about, I'm like, shit, Zap's got a really good job of finding these fucking like golden nuggets of supports that play alongside of him that turn out to be superstars, you know?
He's got 3
Like,
world champion supports, PBM, Roar, and Neilma. We actually got to be with Neil when they won this time.
exactly. And when you think about that, it just shows that like Zap clearly helps to breed them in that direction as well. Like, he can spot talent with playing with them, but also he's definitely a guiding light, because when all those guys would have played with him, they would have looked up to him when they first got on their team. So like, there was a lot of that sort of dependency there. I think you would have seen a similar sort of thing with Baron. I think Barry's showing that he could do the sort of nurturing with 408 right now with Jake. Yeah. I just don't think you got to see much of that with Barry, because he was always with Jeff. You never really got to see him with anybody else. But it definitely is a nurturing sort of style there with that, funny enough. Yeah, Mike was fun back in the day. I think him bringing out the Fenrir was good, but it just made me think of a Raw first of all, because a Raw did it before he did. And that's the first thing I thought about Mike, was like, he's another fucking Raw, this guy. Oh, excuse my language. I forgot where I was now. Yeah, he's like, he's another Raw, this guy. I'm like, man, there's 2 of them now. And realistically, when you watch them play, I can see it still.
Sure.
Like, they're very, very similar.
You're saying Zap's got a type.
To be honest,
He
you
does.
know, I was talking to Zap. I had an interview with him maybe like 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I'm pretty good friends with Steven just outside of Smite as well, and we've talked a little bit about sort of his post professional playing career, and I think he's sort of interested in maybe being a coach or like putting a team together and not playing on it, you know, because of his experience in getting the best out of players. And I know when I talked to Sam really credits Zap a lot with like learning how to play the map macro better, and you know, like situational adjustments in Smite. That
It was
don't get in other
trash.
places,
It truly was. I used to play ranked with Sam. Oh my god, it's like all the lanes. Yeah, he was a kill monster. He always was mechanically really sound, but all the lanes are just flooding. He practically got fire minions as he's trying to 1v4 people, and it probably does get it, but then the minions just take the Titan.
That's always the thing with, like, you can have raw good instinct of like, can I get a kill? Yes. Can I murder everyone? Yes. But reading the map is a bigger picture. You know what I mean? Of like what's worth and what's not. And I think Zap would do a really good job, like of coaching a team like that. I think he's got a lot to give, and I think the biggest thing for Zap for me, and I think this was the crutch of like Zap's evolution in my eyes, was when he got dropped from Trifecta for a second. I think that really, not necessarily humble pied him, but just put him into another gear all of a sudden when he came back into action. And then clearly, you know, they won Worlds last year, so it wasn't a great performance overall, but the build-up of that team, you can just see how good they're looking now, you know, as a squad. Like, they've built on that camaraderie, they've got better as a unit, and you can really sense that. So yeah, I can see Zap doing well.
It was like a phase of maturity for him. I would like to see more veteran players like make teams and not be a part of them.
Yeah. Thanks for watching the SPL Rundown this week. Be sure to be on the lookout for our next episode, which will probably air after the Phase 2 playoffs. As always, if you have any ideas for future guests, either guest analysts or player interviews that you want me to do, feel free to DM me on Twitter at APAM2 or at APAM Productions. And extended cuts of my discussions with these analysts and my interviews with pro players are always available on the APAM Productions YouTube. So be sure to check those out. Thanks for watching, and see you guys soon.